Um, so wanted to s- uh, introduce or continue to extend on this topic of developing a good heart, but enter into basically a few classes on this topic of what to do once we've developed a good heart. So, let's say you've theoretically developed a good heart. What do you do with that good heart? Well, you live your life with that good motivation in imbuing all of your behaviors, all of your activities with concern for others, wish not to harm, and uh, allow that to work through all of your behaviors, all of your activities. But in particular, I wanted to introduce something that's known as the Bodhisattva's way of life. So, um, the the meditations over the last couple of months really on developing a good heart, developing these minds of love and compassion, and this third mind called bodhicitta. Now, bodhicitta defined as literally bodhi means awakening and chitta means mind, but it's a mind that wants to fully awaken for the sake of others, for the sake out of motivated by compassion for others. Now, a person who has developed this mind is known as a bodhisattva. So literally, these are Sanskrit words. Bodhi literally meaning awakening, chitta meaning consciousness or mind, sattva meaning a person. So bodhisattva is a person who is motivated by this mind of awakening. And there are this is obviously is a Buddhist term specifically, but I'll we can understand it in whatever ways we want. But there's a famous text called Guide to the Bodhisattva's Way of Life. This is my favorite translation of this. But Guide to the Bodhisattva's Way of Life is basically an extensive set of instructions, 10-chapter. It's a poem, but it's long poem in 10 chapters on how to carry out your life if you're a bodhisattva. And the essence of that can be described in six practices known as the six perfections. So, all of the characteristics of the Bodhisattva's way of life um, can be understood through these six practices, known as the six perfections, which in turn are really part of two groups called the two collections, cultivating the two collections. To say a word first about Bodhi or awakening, what does this mean? Awakening means awakening from the sleep of ignorance. To understand awakening, you have to understand ignorance. You have to understand what is this sleep of ignorance that we're in. Um, why is it called sleep? Why is it called ignorance? Of course, we have infinite kinds of ignorance. I'm quite ignorant, if you want, about you know fine art history. I've never taken a single class on art history. I've seen my share of paintings and statues and so forth, but I couldn't tell you anything about that. So if you want, you can say I'm ignorant about art history, and I can give you a long list of things I'm ignorant about. Massive. It's infinite. And the more I learn, the older I get, the more I realize, actually, I have no idea, the vastness of human knowledge. So we could say that we're ignorant about all those things, but that's not really what we're talking about. And that isn't necessarily ignorance. Ignorance, ignorance is not just an unknowing. It is an ignoring, right? It's an ignoring. Um, the I didn't check my etymology on this, but I think the GNO part of ignorance comes from the same root word as know, KNO, Gnostic, means about knowledge. And ignorance means basically something that is opposing our knowing. And in particular, it is this mind of ignoring speaks to something that is right in front of our face, but we're not seeing it. And that's what we're talking about with ignorance. It's that there's a reality that's happening right in front of our face that we're not paying attention to, that we're ignoring. And that reality is the reality of dependent relationship, that we are constantly seeing the infinite variety of phenomena. Whatever's appearing to our mind is what is known as dependent relationship, but we're ignoring that reality. Um, To say dependent relationship means you're looking at a computer now. Of course, that came from somewhere. Somebody had to invent the computer, build it, deliver it, pay for it. Um, uh, our self, we come from causes. We come from our parents, the food we've eaten, the education we've had, our knowledge of language. There's not a single thing that we experience in the universe that doesn't come from causes, and those causes imply a world that is unfolding, right? We tend, I've said this before, but we tend to think of a world that is made of nouns. Like we think we know the world. Oh yeah, whatever. I know this, I know that, and so forth. But we don't know the world. The world is this constant unfolding before our very eyes. And it's unfolding from outside in as objects, but it's also unfolding from the inside out. And this is what we talk about. This is what we mean when we talk about awakening versus ignorance. To awaken means to fully understand the way in which the world is this a flowering or unfolding or explosion that is both objective and subjective, or neither objective nor subjective, but it is the interplay of our minds individually and collectively, and whatever is this outer world that allows us to communicate, and that the world in fact is kind of is inconceivable. The reality that we're experiencing is inconceivable, but we think we know what's going on. We think we know what's going on. We think we know, oh, this person's good and this person's bad, and I like this person, and I know this and I don't know that. But the reality is that the world is like a constant miracle that's unfolding. The interplay of our minds individually and collectively, and whatever is this external world that we can have some agreement about. And so to awaken means to awaken your wisdom primarily. But it really means to awaken two things. It means to awaken a wisdom understanding the way things are, dependent relationship, but it also means to awaken the feeling of good fortune, or what's called merit. And so the Bodhisattva's way of life means if you really, really from your heart, you care super deeply about everybody that you're encountering, certainly the people in your social circle, but then everybody else in the world, if you really are deeply, profoundly concerned about the state of the world, that your big job is to accumulate wisdom and merit, or good fortune. Wisdom meaning an understanding of dependent relationship, and merit meaning a feeling or an appreciation for how fortunate we are in every moment. These two are known as the two collections. Why? Because that is what living beings do. We collect stuff. We try to collect things like money and possessions, but also memories and photographs and experiences from vacations, and we collect friends, and we collect recognition at work, and we collect, and we spend our whole life collecting. And meanwhile, all of the things that we collect throughout our life, they're all silently disappearing, quietly sort of disappearing from our memory and from our possession and so forth. And eventually we're born with nothing. Eventually we end up with nothing. So there's this long arc of collecting, and then we end up with nothing at the end, which is utterly terrifying for us. It's fundamental existential terror that everything you've worked for, you will lose. This is my prediction. It's like, if I ran, that's why I don't get to run horoscope columns. I feel like a horoscope column. Everything you've worked for will be lost in time. And so this is why Buddhists get something of a bad reputation for being dismal. It's because we're telling people the truth. But the reason for telling people the truth is not to not to depress people. You can do that on your own, right? All you have to do is watch the news, right? The reason to tell people the truth is to challenge the way we see things and challenge our mental model, because it's not the world that is depressing; it's our mental model and its conflict with the world that's so depressing, right? It's because we just keep believing that there's a world that's just out there and there's good things that all, if you just accumulate and acquire all the good things, you'll be fine, right? And that's not true. Um, but what is true is this wisdom of dependent relationship. And what is true is this feeling or this experience of good fortune that emerges from realizing dependent relationship. Um, and that all sounds nice in the abstract. But the question is, how do we change our mind from its current state, which comes in and out of clarity and in and out of a feeling of good fortune, in and out of depression, and so forth? How do we transform our mind into a state that is joyful, uh, buoyant, generous, wise, and so forth? And that is what the Bodhisattva's way of life is about. Now, um, the it is a little bit of an exaggeration, but there is a caricature of the Bodhisattva's way of life that's a bit helpful. And that is the extreme of one extreme of going off into quiet meditation in isolation from the world and finding inner peace and finding nirvana or whatever. And then that you find peace through separating from the world, right? And so sometimes people, like the people who are attracted to classes like these, might have fantasies. Oh, if I just got the kids, out through college and made enough money and so forth, I could just go on retreat, and then my life would be a nice, quiet, peaceful life, and just meditate and attain nirvana, and everything will be great, and so forth. So um, that's one sort of template for what it would mean to find inner peace. Now, the Bodhisattva's way of life, sometimes caricatured as finding peace while engaging with the world, mixing with general society. And within Buddhism, there's sometimes known as these two vehicles, the sometimes called the Hinayana or the Theravadan vehicle, focused on individual liberation, the Mahayana, or known as the Bodhisattva vehicle, focused on benefiting everybody. And the heroes of the Theravada are always monks and a few nuns, but the world being the biased world that it's been through history, they tend to get underbilled and underrespected. And there's a lot of great, great Buddhist women working to remedy that and bring Buddhism into the modern age along with the rest of society. But, um, you know, you know, um, but the heroes of the Bodhisattva vehicle, the heroes of the Mahayana, are mostly lay people. They're not monks or nuns. They're mixing with general society. They're interacting with people. Um, and they're living their daily life, but they're living their daily life in such a way that they are transforming themselves in the process of benefiting others. Now, that's an extreme view. Of course, the monks and the Theravada and so forth, of course, they're engaging with people all the time and developing loving kindness and so forth. And bodhisattvas also go on retreat and spend time in isolation. But anyway, doesn't matter. What matters is that the bodhisattva's example is a template that kind of looks a lot like us, right? We're engaging with people. We're busy. We're not monks or nuns. We've got a busy life. We're doing all this stuff. We need to be cultivating our own good qualities at the same time that we're interacting with others and helping them. And that's what the Bodhisattva's way of life is famous for. It's being like practices in daily life. So there's 6 of them. Giving, moral discipline, patience, joyful effort, concentration, and wisdom. And I've mentioned these in the past, but giving, moral discipline, and patience, these 3 themselves are sometimes called the collection of merit. Their function is to help us to accumulate that experiential sense of good fortune, giving, moral discipline, and patience. And in today's class, I'll spend more time on those three because we have a whole separate class on concentration and wisdom later. Concentration and wisdom together are known as the collection of wisdom, because it's in meditation and through cultivating a profound wisdom that we can really most deeply change our way of seeing the world, and develop that wisdom of dependent relationship that will really awaken us from our ignorance. But it's these first three that really provide that energy and buoyancy and sense of good fortune, that is the collection of merit or good fortune. Now, in between these is this mind of joyful effort. And joyful effort, some of the text, it says, effort is the cause that causes the increase of both merit and wisdom, that we apply ourselves with a joy and a suppleness and a lightness of body and mind. We bring a joy and a suppleness and a lightness of body and mind to these collections of merit, giving, moral discipline, patience, and to these collections of wisdom, our concentration and wisdom. Meaning that, and roughly speaking, we can say that these first three perfections, giving, moral discipline, patience, are what you practice when you're not in meditation, which is, if you do the math, roughly almost all the time that you're not asleep, right? So giving, moral discipline, patience is what you do when you're not in meditation. Concentration and wisdom is what you do when you are in meditation. But whether you're in meditation or out of meditation, we should be approaching both of these aspects of our life with joyful effort, applying energy with a joyful, a buoyant heart, buoyant spirit. So giving, moral discipline, patience, why are these referred to as the collection of merit? Basically, giving creates merit, creates an experience of good fortune. Patience protects that merit from being destroyed by the mind of anger and jealousy, and moral discipline helps ensure that that merit is pure. Now, I'm talking about merit as if it's a thing, merit or a sense of good fortune. Merit, good fortune, karma, good karma. These three are synonyms. The function of engaging in good actions is, of course, to create whatever outer benefit, but it is also to create inner benefit. That two things happen. You know this Newton's second law of motion: for every action, there's an equal and opposite reaction. So when you act outwardly, you're changing yourself inwardly. It's reasonable, right? And that's what karma is. Karma literally just means action. It means what happens to your mind when you do stuff. Good karma means good actions. Not that mystical, right? Not that strange, right? What happens to your mind when you do good actions? Well, there's two things. Typically, people are happier with you than if you had done bad actions to them. That's the outer result of good actions. But the other thing is that your mind changes to developing a sense of good fortune. And to give an example, one of the things that we're shortest on these days is time and attention. Time and attention are in short supply. So one of the things we can give is our time and our attention for the benefit of others. So if you feel like you don't have enough time and you don't have enough attention and you don't have enough money and you don't have enough ideas and you don't have enough skills and you don't have enough of all that stuff, right? Whatever it is that you think you need. If you feel like you don't have enough of it, it'll make you feel like you can't give anything. You have nothing to give. But if you give, implicitly, you're proving to yourself that you have something to give, right? And what do we give? What can we give? There's four things, four categories. There's material things, there's wisdom advice, there's fearlessness and protection, and then there's love or concern. So um, of course, giving can mean giving material things or helping other people in their work, giving wise advice um, is one of the most powerful, beneficial things we can give. Now, um, for example, I'm trying to practice this giving of wise advice. Now, the fact that I'm giving wise advice does not indicate that I'm an enlightened person. It indicates that I have some wise advice to give. Why? Because I have listened to a whole lot of wise advice, and I appreciate and respect all the wise advice I've received, and I feel a sense of good fortune. Like I've got this, great collection of advice that I've received, and it would be inappropriate of me to not give this, to not pass this along. My teacher used to My main teacher used to give a story that we called the little money story. So he said, if you um, are walking down the street and a beggar asks you for a little money, and you give them a little money, it doesn't mean that you are a millionaire. It just means that you have a little money. So if you see someone and you think they could use some wise advice, and of course you need to be careful because generally people don't like to get advice from anybody. So generally traditionally the rule is never give advice unless people ask you sincerely 3 times. I'm not saying it always has to be like that, but you get the point, right? Never give advice unless somebody sincerely asks at least 3 times. Even then, sometimes they still like get angry at your advice. But anyway, it's a way of hedging your bets. But if you're in a position that someone sincerely is asking for some advice and you have the ability to give some advice, it doesn't mean that you're enlightened. It just means you have a little good advice to give. You have some wisdom to share. That's wonderful. And that's what we mean by giving wisdom. It's like just like if you have a little money, you've got a little wisdom, some material resources, some wisdom, some ability to protect others, reassure them, some ability to, care for others, have this mind of love. All of this is in this practice of giving. Now, I think hopefully you get some feeling that when you give, you feel fortunate. And you probably have that experience, where you've done things for others, um, you know, others who maybe were physically poor or needed or poor in terms of their knowledge of computers, right? Like you help them out with their computer problems or whatever. Um, then you feel fortunate. You feel, I have some, you actually feel encouraged for a little. It feels good to give, right? Now, we're not doing things just to make ourselves feel better. And that's where there's a risk of pride that can come in. What we're trying to do is not to develop pride. We're actually trying to develop the opposite, which is humility, which is a feeling of incredible good fortune that we have so much to give. And what's interesting about pride is that if you give with pride, it kind of ruins the gift from your point of view, because you feel like, well, you basically are using up that good fortune, that feeling of good fortune, to feel that you are better than others. It's a mind of pride, as opposed to feeling like I am very fortunate and I can share this good fortune. So hopefully that you get some sense for the difference between this. I'm going to help you because I'm amazing, or I'm going to help you because I am very fortunate and I have the opportunity to share my good fortune. They are profoundly different minds, and 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 probably you have some feeling for the difference between those. And that's part of what's getting into moral discipline. So moral discipline, I said, makes our that keeps our merit pure. And moral discipline means that we are always acting in an ethical way. Um, The essence of ethics is to not harm others and to try to benefit them, right? The only other aspects of ethics are to systematically improve yourself for the benefit of others. That's also a practice of ethics. That's also kind of discipline. So moral discipline means wherever we think there's a possibility we may cause harm to others, including offending them, disturbing their minds, um, doing things that could, including, buying things and doing things that indirectly harm others, through the infinite supply chain um, that is our universe. So doing whatever we can to try to not cause harm, and keeping a small footprint, a small ecological footprint, a small footprint in terms of how much stuff we consume is an important part of reducing our harm to others. Um, then trying to benefit them in whatever way we can. That's an ethic. But of course, the way to benefit others is giving. So you can see how giving is also it fits into that discipline. Now, this term moral discipline implies a training of the mind, right? A strengthening of the mind. And so it's this action of moral discipline that pervades all of these practices. There is, in fact, a discipline of giving. There's a discipline of patience. There's a discipline of concentration. The discipline just means doing things. It means consciously and means acting intentionally and with care, basically. It is the opposite of acting recklessly or carelessly. Um, um, Discipline doesn't imply pain or struggle or harming ourselves or anything like that, but it does imply a care and a carefulness to all of our behaviors. And the third of these, these 6 perfections is the practice of patience. And I said the practice of patience is to protect the sense of good fortune. In this book, Guide to the Bodhisattva's Way of Life, there's a chapter on each of these perfections. The chapter on relying on patience starts with this very shocking verse. So it starts by talking about giving and moral discipline and how to build up a collection of merit and be a good person. And then it says, all the virtuous deeds and merit, such as giving and making offerings that we've accumulated over thousands of eons. So if you wanted to adopt the view of, that we've all existed for an infinite amount of time, and even if you think about previous lives, everything you've done can be destroyed by just one moment of anger. What? So it's sometimes described as like a spark that ignites a haystack the size of the world, right? So imagine a haystack the size of the world. How much would it take to destroy that haystack? One spark could destroy the entire world. Now, if you think of merit as something like money or something physical, or like good karma, something that's like physical or whatever, you try to do the physics on how's that work, it gets very confusing very fast. If you think, okay, let's say you're feeling very fortunate. You're just sort of sitting there and you're feeling very fortunate. Right? And then all of a sudden, somebody makes some really loud noise. Your partner makes some really loud noise in the other room. And you immediately get angry. Like, would you keep it down? What happens to that sense of good fortune? Right? It is destroyed in an instant, right? So you go into meditation, right? So here's the dirty secret of meditation retreats. You go on a meditation retreat and you really splurge, and you go on like a 1 week or 2 week or a month or 3 month meditation retreat. And you are basically at that point abiding in a state what we call abiding in a God realm. You've actually ascended past the human realm. You've become a divine being. You exist in a state of infinite bliss and peace and meditation. And you're meditating on infinite love and compassion for all beings. And your heart is opened to the entire universe, and you're encompassing all beings. And you've developed a godlike love and compassion for all beings. And then at this meditation retreat, you're in line at dinner, and the person in front of you takes the last cookie off the plate, right? And then you're like, can't believe they took the last cookie. And this anger arises, right? And that incredible amount of good fortune and peace and joy and bliss and so forth is destroyed in an instant. It is a haystack the size of the universe that is burnt by one spark of anger, and jealousy has a similar effect. If you want to understand the physics of the spiritual world, you need to understand how fickle our minds are and how in an instant they can change, right? And how quickly can your mind change from a sense of good fortune to a sense of misfortune? Pretty fast. Now, the good news is all is not lost, because as soon as the mind of anger goes away, you can return to that feeling of good fortune and so forth, but you may have to build it up gradually, right? And it may be hard to get back to that same state of peace. And that's the tricky thing. That's the tricky thing, that some of these good habits are won only gradually, but the benefits can be lost quite quickly. And you know this expression that trust in relationship can take a lifetime to build, but can be destroyed with just a few words? There is a tragic asymmetry in some of the good things in this world, right? A natural ecosystem that has unfolded over millions of years can be destroyed by one oil spill, right? Or one forest fire. There is a tragic asymmetry to the way the world works. But we should not give up hope, right? Instead, we should practice patience. And patience, patience is sometimes described as like an armor that protects the mind from the weapons of anger. So there's a saying from another short text called Advice from a Teacher's Heart that says, since hatred is rife in these impure times, don the armor of patience, free from anger. Since hatred is rife in these impure times, don the armor of patience, free from anger. So to don the armor of patience, one way to think about this is that even if other people get angry, I will not get angry. Even if other people get jealous, I will not get jealous. Even if other people harm me, I will not get angry. Doesn't mean I will abide by their harm. It doesn't mean that I will not do things to protect myself and so forth. But it means that I will protect my mind first, right? You protect that state of mind. So there's nothing about patience that implies not taking action to prevent others from harming you or others, but the harm we need to protect, first of all, is our own mind. We need to develop this mind of patience. And through it all, we apply joyful effort to uplift our mind. And joyful effort just really means we are trying to have a good time in this process of training the mind, because everything can become too heavy if you approach it too rigidly or unskillfully. So there needs to be a skillfulness in our effort. Now, as you can tell, each of these topics, giving, moral discipline, patience, effort, could be a class on their own. In fact, I did give classes on these some months back. If you check, you'll find there's some topics on giving and patience and so forth. But here I'm introducing them briefly help you to appreciate that clearly these are things that we can be doing, can and should and must be doing in our daily life. Is there any opportunity in your daily life to practice giving? For example, giving your time and your attention and your advice and material things and skills. And of course, there is. Is there an opportunity in your life to be practicing moral discipline, like disciplining yourself to not harm others and improve yourself and benefit others? Of course, there is. Is there opportunity in your life to be practicing patience, guarding your mind in this way, armoring your mind against jealousy and patience? You bet there is. Sorry, guarding your mind against jealousy and anger with patience. You bet there is. Now, what is the feeling state with which we should be approaching our spiritual life, these practices? It is the feeling of joy. Um, um, so there's in this book on this in the chapter on effort. Uh, there's beautiful. There's a very very beautiful text, but there's a quote that I'm struggling to remember. So having mounted the steed of bodhicitta, having mounted the imagining bodhicitta, this mind of love and compassion for others, is like a mount, like a horse or something. Having mounted the steed of bodhicitta, the bodhisattva travels the path from joy to joy. Knowing this, who could ever be discouraged? So the purpose of effort is to protect our mind against discouragement and to allow us to liberate energy to make progress on our spiritual path. So the feeling state and the tone and the character of our spiritual life needs to be buoyant, needs to be light, needs to be joyful. Doesn't mean everything's always going to be easy, right? But as we are approaching these things, we want to be playful, right? Skillful, um, working with our mind the way we would work with a puzzle, and not being discouraged, even as our wisdom goes up and down and our peace of mind goes up and down and so forth. We just think that's par for the course. There is no perfect pattern you have to mold your life into. You have to figure out how to make your life unfold as part of this great miracle, and make these teachings meld into your life. And there's a skillfulness and an adaptation you need. That the worst thing that can happen is for us to become discouraged. So anyway, this is the essence of these. And then in next week, I'll look more at these teachings on concentration and then wisdom. But okay, so I've run down the clock. As you can tell, this is there's a lot in this topic, and I wanted to just make sure that I gave it a chance to explain it fully. Why don't we take a few minutes now, just in conclusion, to settle into this, just a wish to practice this collection of merits to enrich our mind in this way. So we can, in our brief meditation, just take a deep breath in and out. And the purpose of our meditation is to take these teachings deeper into our heart. The path to awakening is a collection of wisdom and merit. And we can make a determination to accumulate merit throughout our life by practicing giving, moral discipline, patience, and effort. can reflect that even in this brief time here, we have increased our wisdom through listening and contemplating. And we have increased our merit through appreciating these teachings and developing a wish to put them into practice. We are, in fact, fortunate beings. We make a determination not to allow anger, jealousy, or disrespect for any of these teachings to interfere with that sense of good fortune, and instead to practice patience and continue with these practices throughout the rest of our life. And then we can open our eyes and arise from our meditation.